It began on a night when the sky felt too low, swollen with rain and unspoken warnings, and I remember sitting by the living room window with a mug cooling between my hands, watching water trail down the glass, while the house echoed with a silence that had slowly become the background of my marriage. Marcus had been coming home later for months, always with the same tired smile and convenient explanations about work. And I had accepted them because trusting him was easier than questioning the foundation of the life we built. But that night, midnight slipped past. Without the sound of his key in the door, my calls went straight to voicemail. My messages unread, and anxiety wound tighter with every tick of the clock until exhaustion pulled me into a restless sleep on the couch, only for a soft knock at dawn to drag me back. When I opened the door, Liam stood there. Marcus's younger brother, rain dripping from his hair, his expression strained in a way I had never seen before. And although we had always been cordial, but distant since the wedding, I stepped aside and let him in because in that moment, any familiar face felt like relief. I told him Marcus hadn't come home, and something in his eyes darkened, as if he had expected it. And after a heavy silence, he said, there was something I needed to hear, but that I had to promise not to panic and not to trust anyone, not even Marcus. Words that cracked open a fear I had refused to name. Slowly, carefully, he revealed that Marcus's late nights were not about work at all, but about secret meetings and another woman. And when he handed me an envelope containing a blurred photograph of Marcus holding someone else with unmistakable intimacy, the world shifted beneath me, memories rearranging themselves into something unrecognizable, every reassurance I had once clung to turning hollow. Liam admitted he had followed Marcus after suspecting something was wrong, and had indeed meant to uncover something so devastating, and as I struggled to process betrayal layered with humiliation, he watched me with a gentleness that felt both comforting and dangerous. When he moved toward the door, saying he only came because I deserved the truth, I asked him to stay. Not because I understood everything he had told me, but because I couldn't bear to be alone with it. And in the days that followed, Marcus remained unreachable, his office offering vague excuses. The police slow to treat his absence as anything more than a voluntary disappearance, while Liam settled quietly into the guest room, our interactions cautious in daylight but softer at night. When sleeplessness drew us into the kitchen, where conversations unfolded in hushed tones about childhood memories, family fractures, and the loneliness neither of us had admitted before. Somewhere in those late-night confessions, something shifted between us, a closeness built not on intention but on shared vulnerability, and one evening as another storm gathered outside, and I stood again by the window feeling the weight of abandonment settle into my bones. Liam came up behind me and rested his hand lightly on my shoulder, a simple gesture that unraveled something inside me because it felt steady and real in a way my marriage no longer did. I whispered that I didn't want to be alone, and he answered by holding me as if I were fragile rather than foolish, and what happened between us that night felt less like rebellion and more like two people trying to anchor themselves in the wreckage of a life that had suddenly split open. We did not speak about it the next morning, but the air between us carried a fragile understanding. And 2 days later, the police called to say Marcus's car had been found abandoned on the outskirts of town. Empty and untouched, as though he had simply stepped out and vanished. No signs of struggle, no blood, just absence. I felt a collision of relief and dread because confronting his betrayal had seemed inevitable, yet his disappearance replaced answers with a deeper, colder uncertainty. And as the investigation unfolded and Marcus was officially declared missing, suspicion briefly hovered over me in questioning, though nothing concrete surfaced while Liam stood beside me through every interview, every sleepless night, becoming the constant presence I leaned on even as a quiet doubt began to grow about how much he truly knew. That doubt sharpened one night when I found him alone in the living room holding a small notebook he tried too quickly to hide. My name written on the cover, and after a long pause he admitted he had found it in Marcus's car. But hadn't he given it to the police because of what was inside? And my hands trembled as I flipped through pages filled with scattered thoughts about work and mentions of a woman named Tessa. Yet the final entry shifted everything, describing a fear of being followed, of someone watching him, someone he couldn't trust, ending with a line that if anything happened to him, it wouldn't be an accident. I looked at Liam, questions tightening in my chest. wondering whether Marcus's disappearance was tied to something darker than infidelity. Whether the betrayal had only been a surface crack hiding something far more dangerous beneath. And Liam nodded slowly, saying, Marcus had seemed afraid, but never named who he feared. His tone measured in a way that made it impossible to tell whether he was protecting me or protecting himself, standing there with the notebook in my hands. I realized the narrative I had accepted, that my husband was simply unfaithful, had fractured into something far more complicated, a web of secrets that stretched beyond marriage into territory I didn't understand. And yet, despite the suspicion threading through my thoughts, I couldn't deny the connection forged between Liam and me in the storm's aftermath. A bond born from truth, delivered at the worst possible moment, and sustained by shared uncertainty. Days blurred into one another as the investigation stalled. Marcus officially missing, his absence transforming from shock into a constant ache, and I found myself oscillating between grief, anger, guilt, and an unsettling awareness that the man I married might have been living a life I never truly saw, while the man standing beside me now might know more than he revealed. Still, when night fell, and the house grew heavy with silence, Liam's presence kept the loneliness from swallowing me whole, and as I stood once more by the window watching clouds gather over a horizon that felt endlessly gray, I understood that my life had divided into before and after. Before, the knock at dawn, when I believed routine meant safety, and after, when trust became a question mark, hanging over every memory. Whether Marcus had run from something, been taken by something, or orchestrated his own disappearance, I didn't know. But I did know that storms do not simply pass without altering the landscape. And in the quiet space between suspicion and solace, between betrayal and need, I found myself tethered to Liam, unsure whether he was my refuge or another secret waiting to surface. Aware only that the truth, whatever it was, had already reshaped me in ways that could never be undone.